I've got this tool which has just got a little D-shaped end on it. Right, this is the cocking end. I'll set this to 1/8 of a second and we'll release it and see what happens. That was very quick, so I know that my retard gear train is not in the correct position. Let me have a look at what we've got here. Now I see that someone has bent the pin on the retard gear train inwards, which would speed the thing up. So I'm going to straighten that up first before I make any adjustments. So this pin here, I'm going to straighten that up. If I can get the right tool onto it. It's obviously not that one. Selecting from the wrong row. Straighten that pin up somewhat. Now let's try that round at the 8th position. Cock the shutter. Release the shutter. That's still fast. But that pin is now straight. So I'll open this up and we'll make the adjustment by moving the retard gear train. So I need to remove this. Cock the shutter, which allows the arm on here to swing loose, which exposes this screw, so I can loosen that screw off slightly and move this in slightly. That was probably far too much, but we'll find out. Get this back in position, and of course I've got to get it timed correctly to this pinion, which is there. I'm holding this together with my fingers. I haven't got the retaining ring on the front. That's not going to work nicely, I can see. Let's put that on. Alright, cock it. Set it to 1/8. Release it. That was slow. But that's not too bad. Let's try it on 1 second. And let's set the self timer. And release the shutter. It's running down. Self timer sounds smooth. Well, the shutter certainly runs well. I just need to get that timing adjusted, and basically I'm just going to open this up, move my retard gear train slightly outwards for lesser engagement, which means somewhere between where we started and where we are now. Tighten up the screw, test again. Back once I'm done. Right, well that's bang on the money. That's good. So we can have that off. Put this little lever back in place. This is the lever that stops you from being able to release the shutter if the shutter's not cocked, or stops you being able to depress the shutter release if the shutter's not cocked, I should say. Put that back in place. And let's just pop this retaining ring in place while I'm contemplating getting the rest of the components on that shutter, because this one's got a few odds and sods I need to sort out. There's just a few crusty lumps in here. It's surface corrosion to do with whatever had splashed this camera in the past. And I just need to get the bumps off really, so that this will turn smoothly. I don't want those bumps changing the settings to feel rough. That's just a bumblebee trying to get in the window. Yeah, this is nickel plated brass here, and the corrosion has lifted some of the nickel plating in places, and corroded through to the brass underneath. And it's just like a powdery sort of corrosion. That should be fine. I'll clean it up with a bit of naphtha. I'm not expecting any problems there. This piece is aluminium, and that shows no signs of any corrosion. And this piece is quite heavily chromed and likewise doesn't show any problems. So I'll quickly clean these pieces up and we'll close this shutter. Get off with that for a start. So this ring goes on first, I believe. This is the aperture setting ring. There's a little notch in there which couples with the setting ring at the back. This piece goes over and couples to our shutter speed settings cam plate. If I can get that positioned correctly. The front retainer, the front plate here has these little notches that engages the speed settings cam plate to give us our shutter speed detents. And this only goes on in one position. It's got a notch somewhere here, there, which couples with a post, there. So the retaining plate goes on. The retaining ring goes on rather. Getting these started is often tricky. I think we're in business. Yeah, and I'm tightening this using a wooden toothpick. Just check that everything's correctly in position. That's moving smoothly. It's probably stiffer than I would like. Something just dropped into place then, because that suddenly started to move. That's good. Yeah, we need to back that off a bit. Possibly to there. One more perhaps. Yeah, that sounds and feels good. That single tiny screw goes in here to lock that retainer ring. Just blow that dust out, and that is our shutter basically complete. Our flash contact would be a lot happier if it wasn't rubbing on things. That should be okay once it's connected. Right, so if we set this to, where are we? Let's just say we're set, where's our alignment mark? Don't really know. Let's just cock the shutter and see what it does. That was B, I would say it, I guess. Definitely. So our alignment must be here for our speeds. 2, 4, 8. Let's try that. That should give us an 1/8 of a second if I'm correct. I'll just move that. B, 1, 2, 4, 8. Yep, that's all good. That's our shutter back together. I need to look at the lens. Now the rear group in particular was quite dusty, inside and out. I think it's just the external surfaces. I don't think I'm going to have to take that apart, but I won't know until I start cleaning it. So, just taking some glass cleaner. Just clean that surface. When you have a dusty surface like that, you need to be very cautious. Apply your damp cotton bud gently to the surface on the first round to get any dust and grit off the surface. You can be somewhat more firm on a second round when all you're trying to do is get rid of any marks, any rainbow marks that you see on any smears. Now that surface looks good now. I'm going to put that into the shutter body so it'll hold it nicely in place for me while I clean the other surface. And blow all that dust off there. And same again. The dust that's on there is probably a little bit sticky. So be very gentle with the first round of cleaning. Going to get anything off that surface that's loose. Not be grinding it into the surface. That's looking good. I'll do it again. I don't know the exact construction for the Agfa Solagon lens, but it'll be something like the Schneider Xenon or Rodenstock heligon, I would imagine. It's probably 6 pieces of glass with a cemented pair in the front group and a cemented pair in the rear group. That looks pretty good to me. I think we'll call that one a win. Let's have a look at this front group here. Now this was reluctant to come loose when we were taking the shutter apart, so I'm just making sure I clean up around the threads of it with a bit of naphtha. You can see there was a bit of corrosion and rubbish in there. That's why it would have been tight. And that's where moisture or something has got round that and into the shutter. Okay, now I'm going to clean the inside surface. And basically this is a duplicate of what I've just done with the rear group. There's not so much dust on this piece of glass. The rear one by comparison had quite a bit of dust in it, which may mean that someone had had the front one out at some stage to clean it and either didn't know how or didn't bother to clean the rear glass. I'll screw that into the shutter. do that up finger tight. It doesn't need any more than that. And look at the front surface. There's a lot of rubbish came off on that. Those I'll do that again. I think the glass is basically very sound, but around the edges, around the name ring, is dust or corrosion or dirt or something. Yeah, you can see that the paint's gone for some of that name ring there. That's certainly a sign of corrosion, or usually corrosion, sometimes just inappropriate cleaning, but usually corrosion. And see if I can get this edge a bit better. It's pretty good. Alright, another round. I've just got some residual marks right around the edges, and I can see from the crappy way that the paint is on that name ring, it's something unfortunate's happened there. Somebody might have used a solvent or something for cleaning the glass, and it's dissolved the paint and run the paint down onto the glass at that point. That's certainly something that can happen if someone uses acetone or something like that on the glass. Acetone can do a wonderful job of cleaning glass, but it's not much fun next to paint. Okay. Yeah, a few more marks I want to have a go at there, otherwise I think I'm done. Before I put the shutter back on the front of the camera, which we've still got off in pieces, I've got to clear all this rubbish out. That's all sand and all sorts in here. A lot of it's stuck in there, so it's either stuck from corrosion or it's stuck from dried out grease. But I want all that sand and grit out of there before we put our nice clean shutter back into it. Let's get these levers popped down into position. Now that means that these rings probably go on the other way, so as not to foul that lever. That looks promising. They've got a little flattened off area on one side, and that's probably to allow this lever to drop down. That looks good. And that little drive dog there probably needs to be driven on a little bit further than that, so I'll just lean on that. That looks good. So we've got our shims in place. This piece cover goes over here, that arm has to go through that slot. You'll notice I'd taken the rear lens group out while I was putting this on so I can get this over the top. That looks right. I'll put the rear group back in place. And next it will need to be put back into here, the first thing to do is to solder the flash wire back in position. So that wire's got to come through this hole here. That was the red wire. Was there anything odd about the arrangement of that? I would think that it went under that, around that lever. That wire is very stiff. I don't think that's likely to cause a problem. We'll just have to arrange it best to suit the suit myself. So we had an insulating sleeve on there. Just make sure there's no threads of wire sticking out the side where they can short on anything. Okay, so I want to solder my wire back onto the flash contact here. I put a bit of heat shrink around that to keep it off this plate. I'm not sure whether I've done enough to that. Yeah, that's better. I'll solder that wire on, and then hopefully I can just flip this onto here, connect it back up, put the retainer ring in place, which is here, and we'll be on home straight. Well, here I have it all back together again. The earth wire connected here, flash contact soldered back in place correctly. Everything seems to work smoothly, so I think that's probably it as far as the shutter and focus assembly for this camera are concerned. That'll cock there, and the release will come in here. So that's good. That's all moving nice and freely now. Glass is clean, shutter works correctly, focus helical, nice and smooth. None of that ridiculous stiffness we had earlier. So hopefully that's the end of that particular problem. Of course, I've got to decide what I'm doing with the rest of the camera, because there's sand in here too. That's the next task. Let's carry on with this Super Silette. First I want to get the rewind knob off. So put something through the fork of the rewind and spin that off. Be careful not to lose that spring from underneath there. The advance lever. I can never remember whether that screws clockwise, left hand thread or right hand thread. It's conventional right hand thread. I just loosened that up with a tool. I'm just spinning that out with a toothpick. Let's see what we've got here. The frame counter disc. It's got a ratchet on the bottom of it. Got a plain washer here. This piece, this is the frame counter. Note the direction that this fits. It's got a pin on it, drops down in that hole there. The lever should just fit over the shaft. Not expecting any exciting things there. This piece, note the direction of that. Right, the top cover itself. One screw here. One screw here, and the cover comes off. I didn't have to do anything here. Let's have a look under the cover. Nothing exciting. Yeah, shutter release is a bit corroded looking. There's something wedged in there. I think that's the pin that the cable release would press on. That's a bit corroded. That'll need to be cleaned and put back. So don't lose that, otherwise your cable release won't work properly. Otherwise that's good. Let's have a look at this shoe. There's a bit of corrosion under here. Will that screw come out? Yep. Can I lift this out? I want to get that little spring out if I can, and because there's all this corrosion here, I'd like to be able to clean it all away. Oh, that's all a bit dirty. Oh, it's one of those jobs you need 3 hands for. Okay. I don't want to break my nice new tweezers fighting with this thing. Back in a second. I have to lift 3 spring-loaded tabs all at the same time. But if I put a couple of dressmaker's pins here underneath the tab, I can hold 2 of them up while I get to the 3rd. I'm just about where I want to be. Ooh. Will it push back? This is all corroded, so it's not really wanting to exactly move as freely as it should. Oh, that really does not want to come off. That should slide out from there, but it's corroded into place. I really want that off. without breaking it.